Welcome to The Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this 4-episode series sponsored by Sage Publishing, my guests and I will be discussing how libraries are creatively supporting faculty and students in the remote teaching and research. Our guests will describe how they quickly adjusted to and expanded their remote learning environments as COVID-19 spread across the country last spring. We'll also look at how those changes evolved as they moved into summer and began to plan for the fall, and I use this term loosely, reopening. Plans that include new approaches to customer service, reconfiguring physical spaces, and developing easier remote access to library services and resources. Joining me are Linda Van Kuren, Assistant Dean for Access and Resource Management at Georgetown University, Sally Gibson, Library Director at Missouri Western State University, Kat McGrath, Renewals and Collections Librarian at the University of British Columbia. In this final episode of our series, our guests look ahead, hopefully not too far ahead, and speculate over which services and workflows will likely remain, even as we return to some semblance of normal operations. Great. I do want to start looking ahead to the future a little bit, and fully understanding that A, in normal times that's difficult to do, but B, especially now. But again, we're looking at so many dramatic changes to the way we provide services and work with our colleagues, and it does raise the question of what we're doing now that may remain in place with us, especially the things that are working really well. So I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the strategies you're pursuing now that will likely remain with us long term? In other words, in what ways, potentially, do you think that some of your academic libraries' operations will change more permanently? And Linda, we'll just start with you.
Yes, I do think this is a very interesting time, and we don't quite know yet what strategies will last after all this is over. But I do think a more effective use of Zoom or whatever virtual meeting technology you're using will continue. So using things like polling and breakout rooms to make it so it's a true interactive experience for the students will continue. For our staff, we had limited teleworking opportunities prior to this, and I do believe that will not be the case once we all return to the physical building. I believe that most people will telework for some portion of their work week. Another thing that's going to impact our operations, but we don't know yet how, is the economic impact of the unprecedented expenditures that all of the organizations have had to spend. And we don't know yet how that's going to impact us, but I do believe it's going to be profound, not only on universities, but on the libraries and all the organizations within them.
Agreed. Sally, how about you?
I'm thinking, I agree with Linda on the budget. I think that's going to have long-term ramifications. And, some of us haven't recovered from the recession of 2008. And now here we are again, kind of facing another budget crisis. But what I'd like to see is, I think we always had our distance students, we were aware of them, but we didn't have them as our primary focus. And so, yes, we have all these options available for them, but we still kind of depend on the orientation. We depend on face-to-face and things like that. So I think that's going to be a permanent change, where the distance student and the online student is maybe the first thought rather than the secondary thought.
Well said. And Kat?
Yes, and I would definitely echo the notion that working from home will be more widespread. We've got many staff who have long commutes, and they haven't missed that at all. I think during this period. I think also just different kinds of content creation for instruction and orientation, all the different tools that are being developed and used, and opportunity for the library to really be a part of that process, embedded in the courses in different ways than we have in the past. Mm-hmm. And just flexibility around what new opportunities are going to come out to find the balance. And we talked about this at the very beginning, just the sort of serendipitous things that you learn as you're walking across campus or sitting with someone over lunch and things like that. We're just we miss things, and it'd be great to find ways to get that restored.
Right. Excellent. So a recurring concept I'm hearing from librarians as they alter their services to accommodate off-campus learning is a greater focus on collecting engagement and demographic data. This is being done already to some extent, but it seems like this will become even more important going forward, especially as many libraries are launching new online platforms, and they're certainly keen on seeing how those are being used and to what extent. So I'm wondering, how will this usage and demographic data help the library make better decisions about services, resources, and so on going forward? And Linda, why don't we start with you?
Yes, about 4 years ago, we implemented an authentication system that does allow us to track usage of materials based on demographic characteristics such as department or patron type. We make no distinction between the user experience when they're on campus versus off campus. So essentially, everyone logs in all the time. Having this kind of data is even more important today than it was when it was 4 years ago. It helps us make collection decisions about what to keep and what not to keep, but it also will help us have the conversations about the budget impact due to COVID-19, and we can have these conversations at a much more granular level than we ever had before. So I can talk to a specific department about their specific use versus a aggregate usage number that didn't have the demographic information attached to it. It's much more meaningful with administrators and finance people to have that demographic information as we have to make some tough decisions potentially in the months and years to come.
Right. And Sally, how about you?
Well, we're not as sophisticated as Linda. I'm very impressed with her ability to gather that information, but I do think we do need to focus on the total student experience rather than kind of the aggregated data and things like that. So I can see that becoming more and more important, and those of us who haven't gathered it in the past beginning to gather it.
Yep. How do you, Sally, just sort of hypothetically speaking, I mean, what would be the benefits for your institution specifically?
Well, I'm thinking just this spring, I have no idea how many students remained actively engaged with the library resources and what their experience was. And it was interesting. We had some surveys go out, and several of them did mention the library and how successful it was, but it wasn't as clear as I'd like it to be. It was kind of a general survey, and so I think getting more specific on and be able to kind of dial down on the information would be helpful.
Right. And Kat, what about you?
I can say that we're actually moving forward on that authentication system that I think Linda's referring to as well. That was actually what our original implementation group was focused on, and then we got moved over to Lean Library to get that in place, and now we're returning to getting this other service in place for the very reasons that Linda described. Another, I think, piece that is, I think, helping us in terms of collections is, as I mentioned, the syllabus service and really getting a better handle on what kind of content is being used and needed for course development. So a lot of times we understand that there's usage, but we don't really know where it's being used. So having it directly integrated into our course reserve tools and services, we'll be able to see, this is an area where there's content that we need to be sure we have, and we have it in a stable way for not just a single user, but actually for this whole cohort.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Linda, I think you mentioned earlier that using interlibrary loan for ebook content was something your library has been doing or looking at. Can you talk more about that? How does that work in progress, work in practice, um, and do publishers need to alter their agreements, or what does that look like?
So that's our ideal. We don't have the ability to do this right now. We can interlibrary loan, depending on our licenses. We do interlibrary loan chapters from ebooks.
Okay.
But what we really would encourage publishers and vendors to think about is how we can fairly interlibrary loan entire ebook contents, similar to how we would a print book. When we first moved to a virtual learning environment, essentially our ability to lend or borrow print book materials ceased, because most places were not allowing any staff access, at least initially, to their buildings. So if we had the ability to interlibrary loan the full ebook content, it wouldn't have totally alleviated the problem, but it would have somewhat alleviated the problem. It would need to be addressed both in licensing, again, so it's fair to both the publisher and the libraries. But it also needs to be addressed technically. So, for example, not all platforms allow for a complete ebook to be downloaded at one point. There has been some work done by this and by some groups, and we certainly encourage and are happy to talk to anyone who would like to talk about how to maybe make this happen in a more regular manner.
Okay. Um, I'm curious, when we emerge from all of this, and hopefully sooner the better, in what ways do you think your online services or digital services will be stronger? Again, what components are likely to become permanent, and what others, if any, do you feel like you might be shedding as things return to normal? And Sally, I'll just start with you on this one.
Well, and I'd also like to kind of agree with Linda on the interlibrary loan and ebook. I thought there was a nice spirit of cooperation between publishers and libraries this spring. And so I'd like to see that continue, because,
Yeah.
I mean, we've all had the primary focus of making these resources available to everyone, and kind of continuing along those thoughts as we kind of move towards more back to normal and people can actually get to the physical locations. But for us, we had access to resources we never would have had otherwise, and it was really beneficial. So I'd like to, I know publishers still need to make money and things like that, but
no, but that would be nice. Yes,
that would be. I mean, just that spirit of cooperation. I'd like to see it continue.
Yeah, excellent. And Kat, how about you?
I think one of the things I'd also like to mention is within the library that our metadata teams have been working really hard to ensure that our records are. They've been working on enhancements of them and doing everything they can to improve their discoverability and value. And then that, of course, ties in with the other tools that we use to, whether it's our discovery services or Lean Library or other Google Scholar, all of those things that we're all working on making the content that we have access, that we own and have access to, available and findable. So I think that this is a period of discovery of what the libraries offer within their virtual walls, if you will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about staffing a little bit, and how current job descriptions might change, or maybe they're having to change, or ideas for entirely new positions. Are any of you currently looking for or have recently hired new expertise, or sort of out of necessity begun introducing new responsibilities to existing staff? And Linda, I'll just start with you on that.
I see a need for even more librarians to have very, very strong technical skills.
Yeah.
So experience with programming, with using APIs, with identity management. We need even more individuals that understand standards and the technologies that are needed to connect our library systems with non-library systems. How do we integrate into wherever our patrons, whatever format our patrons are using to do their work? How do we get the library there for their use? In my mind, those skills are essential to continue to provide the curated quality evidence that our patrons need to succeed
Yeah.
in their jobs.
Yeah, good point. Sally, how about you?
So our university, since we're kind of worried about the budget and things, we're doing some kind of pairing of jobs that are different. Like we'll have an athletic coach be a hall director and things like that. So I can see maybe some fitting of jobs together that you wouldn't necessarily bring together. And I think librarians have a variety of skill sets and a variety of backgrounds, and so maybe helping the university out with communication or as a hall director, or something that you wouldn't necessarily think of pairing together. I could see that happening as staffing becomes difficult and budget, just based on the budget, you don't have the ability to hire as many people. So.
Right. And then Kat, how about you?
Well, we don't have a hiring freeze. It's called a chill, I believe. But I would say, given that our focus is really on online resources, and virtually every online resource requires a license agreement, that area we do need greater support is licensing expertise, exploring some of the terms and conditions that Linda talked about that are important for us to explore, to negotiate with publishers. And certainly areas of services within the library that we're really expanding is on research data management, GIS, and digital and open scholarship. So those are skills that are important to develop and build.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's all we have time for. So Linda, Sally, Kat, thank you so much for being on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. You just heard from Linda Van Kuren, Assistant Dean for Access and Resource Management at Georgetown University, Sally Gibson, Library Director at Missouri Western State University, Kat McGrath, Renewals and Collections Librarian at the University of British Columbia. This series is brought to you by Sage Publishing. If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, and if there's a topic you'd like us to cover, drop me a line. I'm at bmickey@ala-choice.org. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.